Witam Was na kolejnym spotkaniu webinarowym w Cohabitacie. Dzisiaj zajmiemy się tematem, który jeszcze nie był poruszany dotychczas, ponieważ skupimy się na permakulturze. Na wstępie w ogóle chciałabym podziękować wszystkim, którzy wspierają nas i wybierają zaproszenia dla fanów, gdyż dzięki Wam właśnie możemy się rozwijać, tworzyć te webinary i zapraszać takich właśnie wybitnych gości, jakich na przykład dzisiaj możemy powitać, jakiego dzisiaj możemy powitać, czyli Richarda Perkinsa. Permakultura, no cóż, Cohabitat jest swoistą permakulturą. Pewnie wiecie już coś na ten temat, ale może przyda się wspomnieć coś na sam początek. Cohabitat dąży do tego, żeby wytworzyć właśnie kulturę trwałą i wszyscy tutaj, spotykając się na samą edukację, jesteśmy już częścią właśnie takiej sieci permakulturowej, która finalnie może zaistnieć jako właśnie tworzenie poszczególnych farm opartych o permakulturę. Bo czym jest permakultura? Permakultura, jak sama nazwa po angielsku wskazuje, to jest permanent culture, tak? Czyli trwała kultura oparta o zasoby, taka, która tak naprawdę wzmacnia ekosystem i współtworzy go, buduje, a nie grabieżczo niszczy. Więc dzisiaj bardzo ważny temat i tak naprawdę pierwszy raz będziemy o tym mówić w Cohabitacie i będziemy to kontynuować, więc na pewno jeszcze spotkacie się z webinarami takimi na ten temat, gdyż jest to mega istotne dla nas. Ale na wstępie też chciałabym Was zaprosić do artykułu, który będzie publikowany już niedługo w magazynie Wytwórcy. Jest to artykuł Wojciecha Górnego, właśnie Perma, co, jaka kultura, który nakreśli właściwie, czym jest całe zjawisko. No, dzisiaj niesamowity moment. Richard Perkins zaakceptował nasze zaproszenie, więc będziemy mogli przysłuchiwać się, jak Richard tworzy taką samowystarczalną farmę, jakie ma doświadczenia w tym temacie. Richard też jest w ogóle nauczycielem permakultury i takie oto warsztaty będą też prowadzone niedługo w Polsce. Jeszcze raz chciałabym Wam bardzo podziękować, bo dzięki Wam możemy się rozwijać i ogólnie webinary skupiają coraz większą rzeszę fanów i fanów permakultury. W poprzednim miesiącu było nas ponad 5500 na takich spotkaniach, więc ta nasza sieć samoedukacyjna świetnie się rozwija. Dobrze, ja już nie będę przeciągać. Magazyn Wytwórcy będzie już dostępny za kilka tygodni. Jesteśmy właściwie na etapie tworzenia pierwszych wydruków. Więc teraz przejdźmy już do samego tematu. Richard, bardzo ważna osoba, która tworzy tak naprawdę naukę o permakulturze. Bardzo podoba nam się właśnie to, w jaki sposób Richard mówi o permakulturze, gdyż mówi w sposób naukowy i ma zmysł projektanta, co jest niesamowicie ważne. Więc hello Richard, are you there? Now it's time of your presentation. So see you.
Fantastic.
Oh,
Hi everyone.
okay.
Does the audio sound good, Agatha? Okay.
Hello.
Great to be with you all. I hope you can understand my English. It's been a long day here at the farm. We've been taking tours around the farm with different groups today. So it's nice to be able to connect with all of you in this digital medium and share a bit of what we're up to here and our approach to design for farm scale permaculture. Like, how do we do this kind of design work on larger landscapes, which looks quite different to sustainability on a homestead or small scale. Does that sound okay? I'm just wondering if people can hear me. Okay, great. So I'm going to jump right into it because an hour or so is not so long to get into what we do. But I hope to share the design approach that we use for properties in different parts of the world in the framework and context of our place in Sweden here. So we're joining you from 59 degrees north. It's the coldest, wettest spring for many decades here, so our gardens are a little far behind. And it's just in the last 2 weeks that summer has finally arrived here. What we're doing here is farming on 10 hectares. It's a very small farm in modern terms, but a very diverse farm, and it's laid out to be a farm that will exist well into the future. So we've based the production on perennial plants, grassland, grazing animals, and tree crops. We have fruits and nuts and berries. But unlike most farms today in this area, we produce food for our own needs as well, mainly producing for our own needs, and then we also produce a surplus that we sell. There's two main arms to our project. One is that we want to demonstrate a small, viable, local food-producing farm that stands alone on its own 2 feet, as it were. And the other is that we're running as a full-time education hub during the summer months. So we have people here from about 26 different countries who come to learn about how we approach design for farm-scale projects, and they get practical experience working with the sort of systems that we advocate. Right now it's just turning summer, but this is what the farm looks like for half a year. Probably quite familiar for some of you in the climate you're in. And then we have a very active 6 months farming where we have to produce all of our needs and enough surplus for the winter into storage for meeting our needs in winter. Yesterday the farm looked like this. We've been on the ground now for 8 months implementing our design work. And what I'd like to share with you today is some of the approach and strategies that we use in farm scale design, and sort of show you them in reference to what we're actually doing here at Ridgedale. So there's a philosophical element behind all of this, but we're also very much focused on pragmatic approaches to producing very high nutrient dense food for local people. We're on slopey land, and we're in the, it's hard to translate, but we're in a zone 3 or 4 in USDA terms. It's hard to translate them because we're so far north here. Like currently the sun goes down at about 11:30 at night and comes up again at 4 o'clock in the morning. So it's quite hard getting chickens to sleep at night. They start laying eggs at 4 o'clock. But what you see here is the main few fields of the farm with rows of trees planted into the pasture in a silver pasture arrangement. And they're laid out on Keyline Design, which I'll talk about shortly. And then we graze different species of animals through these pasture lanes. And then we have the kitchen in the background there, the farm center, where we meet most of our own needs and spend a lot of time working with education with people. So if it's going okay for you and you can understand me, maybe a couple of people can just respond if they're hearing me okay, if I'm not speaking too fast. Perfect. And I'll jump right into it. And fine to ask questions, and I'll keep my eye on the chat box as we go. So this is a pretty standard a slide of calories delivered to the food system per calorie produced. So the darker the red, the less sustainable these countries are, you could say. And up in Sweden, we're consuming mostly imported foods. I'm hoping if you zoomed in on this map, you'd see a little green block where our farm is, hopefully, at some point. So we're overproducing food. But the reason we have these two main arms to the farm is that it's one thing for us to create a demonstration of something that's possible, but really we rely on hundreds of other people around this region doing the same, because we believe in local food systems. We want to sell all the food we produce within 50 kilometers. So we need someone else 70 kilometers away doing the same thing, servicing their food shed, you could say. So we're very interested in education, because if we educate other people in ways that work, then they can learn from our mistakes. then we see that our future is going to be better off for that too. So the quote from Quan Tzu underneath there, when planning for a year, sow corn, when planning for a decade, plant trees, and when planning for a lifetime, train and educate people, really rings true to us. And we spend a lot of time with education in different parts of the world. My background is I went to agricultural college for organic crop production at 18, and it left me with more questions than answers, you could say. It didn't really stimulate me in the way I was looking for. And so I set out on a path looking for viable alternatives and have looked at agriculture in different parts of the world and came across permaculture in 2001 and have been studying this ever since. And I'd say nowadays we're not just working with permaculture design, we're in a way more aligned with what I would call regenerative agriculture. And in our design work, we integrate various ecological design disciplines, and the three main disciplines we work with I'll share with you tonight. Basically, we're interested in good design, anything that works. If something works, we'll include it. If it doesn't work, we'll get rid of it. So this is how we work. But we're combining education with pragmatic, scalable, viable alternatives for agriculture. And so things start to look a little bit different when we start producing excess food for other people. It's one thing to produce food for our family and be self-sustaining, but once we want to produce food for the local village, things look a bit different in our systems, and hopefully that will be highlighted tonight. So I'm really interested in this question, what lies beyond sustainable? Because sustainable is just staying where you are, getting water. It's not going anywhere. We know that most of the Western world lives in a manner that cannot be sustained. So what we're interested in is what's beyond that. And I like to replace the word sustainable with regenerative. What does it look like if we want to reinvigorate the local economy, reinvigorate the local food supply, reinvigorate community, and reinvigorate soils that we manage? Ultimately, we're here to manage and steward the soil. So I want to frame this slides with what lies beyond sustainable. And so what I would define as regenerative agriculture, to me, it must be soil building. And we've set ourselves up here as a demonstration site, so we must be able to show that we are building soil. It takes on average per person on the planet today, 10 tons of topsoil per year is lost to produce the food for one person. Each one of us eats about 400 to 450 kilograms of food a year, and yet 10 tons of soil are lost through agriculture to produce that. That's highly unsustainable, obviously. And we see that if we look at the history of the last 400 years, every single culture on the planet that has been damaging its topsoil resources is now no longer on the planet. So we must be building soil. And I highlight this because even in organic literature, it's acceptable to have a certain amount of topsoil loss. And in my mind, that's totally unacceptable. We must be building soil in whatever way we can, whether we're a vegetable producer, grazing animals, planting tree crops, we must be able to build soil. In brackets there, it says carbon sequestration. Soils work around carbon. Carbon in the soil that's making up humus in the soil is what feeds microorganisms. It's what holds moisture in the soil. It's really what makes soil different to dirt, you could say, the life and the carbon in it. And regenerative agriculture needs to be holistically managed. Permaculture design has never had a holistic management framework, a decision-making matrix, you could say. So we use Alan Savory's holistic management to deal with decision-making, because farms are very complex. We're dealing with people systems, we're dealing with ecosystems, we're dealing with financial systems. These are all complex. And by complex, I mean systems that can change and evolve and grow in unpredictable ways. And so we must have a management decision-making framework that allows for that complexity. So we outsource that part of design to Alan Savory's holistic management. I really recommend people to look into that. We must also mimic ecosystem processes, this idea of working with nature. I'm just going to type this in the box here. Alan Savory and holistic management. It's mainly focused around grazing animals, making decisions holistically, and financial planning. But really worth looking into. It's not a decision-making methodology, it's a decision-making framework, to be precise. But I can send you a link to resources to look into for that. They have a great website, the Savory Institute. Yeah, but we'll drop that there for now. People can look that up. We must mimic ecosystem processes. We've got to work with nature, not against it, as you'll have heard in the permaculture words. We've got to use local inputs and outputs, utilize waste streams, and find low oil, low money, low tech ways to do farming. We know oil is not going to be around in its current form at some point in the future. So we need to use a little bit of oil left to get some of these perennial long-term farming systems back in place, and find ways to produce really high quality food locally that don't require us to go into debt. It's here in Sweden, the average age of a farmer is about 65. And this is probably similar in a lot of countries in Europe and around the world. And most farmers tell their children to go to the city and get a real job. And so we're losing the whole skills in a generation. And I'm sure it's similar to Poland. I don't know. I get the sense that a lot more people know about living on the land in Poland. Here in Sweden, it's a very rich country and people are very disconnected from the landscape around them and the food supply, which is the case in many countries nowadays. But big farming is all based on bigger machines, bigger debts, bigger buildings, higher productions. Yeah, it's the same here, you say. It's the same all over. So we're looking at low-tech ways, low inputs. Everything we're doing here at our farm, Ridgedale, is based on low oil inputs, super low financial inputs, and using interesting technologies, but mixed with old-fashioned ways of doing things too, as and where they're appropriate. We need to be certified by customers. We don't advocate certified organic or any of these things because they cost money to the producer and they don't necessarily bring many benefits. We also see that organic certification does not mean something is good. If you go to a supermarket and buy organically produced chicken, for example, it's usually come from a very big scale production with very little care compared to what we can do in a very small scale locally. I'm not saying organic is bad, I'm just saying I don't want to have to pay money to offer someone real food. Okay, so how do I do that? Well, I have to work locally and have an intimate relationship with my customers, because then I'm certified by my customers. If they can walk around the farm, today we had 2 open days, for example, we had 2 groups come and look around the farm. They can see with their own eyes how we work and how we produce things and the level of care and thought and attention that goes into this. Then they're going to keep coming back if they enjoy eating what we produce. And so that creates what I would consider real food security. Those people know that as long as they keep buying from us, we'll be able to stay in business and keep producing, and everyone's winning. So everyone's got to benefit. The customers have to benefit. The landscape has to benefit. We have to benefit, i.e. make a living. And then the last point here is multi-capital abundance. What I mean by this is redefining our relationship to finances. In the perspective of how I was brought up, capital means money, finances. But financial capital is just one form of currency, you could say. Some of the things we're doing here are swapping intellectual capital with experiential capital, cultural capital. And these are all valuable things that help us in our decision making. We're not just making decisions financially. Sometimes we'll make decisions that are bad financially, but they give us a really rich experiential capital. And this is just a slide off a colleague and friend of ours website, 8forms.org. They wrote a book called Regenerative Enterprise, defining how businesses of the future are going to work. But basically, they're going to benefit everyone involved. If a business is going to be regenerative, everyone involved must be winning. If we can create win-win-win situations, then everyone wants to keep playing. So just quickly, the three main frameworks that we work with are permaculture design, and I define that as conscious, intelligent design, creating regenerative agricultural ecosystems that produce really good livelihoods through managing whole systems. So we've got to reflect natural patterns and flows and relationships, connect different elements within systems to create beneficial arrangements for energy efficiency and better yields, and resilience in the face of changing climates and global weirding and this kind of thing. And we reinvest surpluses into different forms of capital. We reinvest in people. We reinvest in landscape features that don't necessarily bring us a financial return from the farm perspective, but bring benefit to the wildlife or whatever it is that we are managing. So permaculture, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, but this is one aspect of what we work with. We're also very influenced by Keyline Design, which is the work of P.A. Yeomans from Australia. And his design approach is a whole nother design framework that we integrate fully into what we do. Because what it allows us to do is order how we structure permaculture design for larger landscapes. Permaculture design is a fantastic umbrella for everything we do, but it doesn't have a very clear framework for approaching landscapes bigger than a few hectares. And Keyline Design just totally clarifies that and gives us a super clear methodology for working. And it's based around P.A. Yeoman's insights around primary landscape features, understanding how water moves in landscapes according to topography, the shape of the land, and designing very robust energy efficient farms accordingly. So using the landscape to pattern design rather than imposing our design onto the landscape. And we use also this Yeoman's plow that we brought over from Australia. It's just a subsoil plow, which you'll have plenty of lying around in Poland, in every country. It's a non-inversion plow. In the bottom photo, you can see it being pulled through the ground. We use it to lift compaction in the subsoil, right, and create deeper topsoil. The only difference between the topsoil and the subsoil is life, air, and water. So we can take our degraded old farmland that's been compacted from machine use and bare soil farming, and we can break up the ground without turning the topsoil underneath the subsoil. And we can allow water and air back in, which allows plants to root deeper, and they will release sugars from their roots, which create the conditions for life to thrive in the soil. So we can build topsoil quickly. But another aspect of Keyline Design is really important for our framework is what's called Yeoman's scale of permanence. And this is the order in which we apply permaculture design to farm landscapes. We start by understanding the rules and the climate that we work within. You know, are we working in a degraded landscape? Probably. So what did that landscape look like optimally? Right? And what will it go back to if we put in place all the ingredients of the bigger picture? This is particularly important if we're working in degraded landscapes like parts of Spain and Portugal that are heavily desertified now, which used to be mixed broadleaf forests with the diversity of the tropical rainforest. So we must know that this landscape will start behaving very differently if we restore the nutrient cycle, the water cycle, the carbon cycle back in the soil. We must know this before we start, otherwise we're always going to be designing in a very limited fashion. It's really important that we understand what this climate optimally looked like before humans intervened. And then we look at the land shape, the shape of the topography, the shape of the contour lines of a map, and that allows us to understand where water is moving in the landscape. And this is a very big subject. We spend at least a week training people with the basics of Keyline Design, but I'm just giving you an overview of the things we work with. We first optimize the water layer of a design, and that then tells us where to place roads within a farm, where to place things like trees that are very permanent. They may be living hundreds, thousands of years. Only then do we start placing buildings and fences and soils. So this scale of permanence is based on how permanent something is. Water is a very permanent feature. Right? If we build dams and ponds in the right place in the landscape, they will be there for thousands of years. You see that soil is at the very bottom. Soil is very easy to damage, but it's also incredibly easy to build if we follow nature's patterns. So that's why it's very impermanent. We can build it, we can destroy it. And so it's a constant dynamic. So this is the order we go through design. We always follow this pattern for organizing permaculture design on larger landscapes. The other main thing we use, permaculture design, Keyline Design, and holistic management. I'll come back to those questions that are popping up. I'm just going to keep flowing for now. Holistic management is the work of Alan Savory. It's got 3 parts. One is about holistic decision making. Humans have never had a decision making matrix before that deals with complexity. I really highly recommend that you look up the Savory Institute and look at some of this work. One of the main reasons people come into contact with holistic management is through planned holistic grazing and the movement of animals mimicking how large herbivores moved in the wild. Now, we have amazing technologies at our fingertips today, like being able to sit on a computer in remote Sweden and talk to you all in Poland, but also this ability to fire electrons down electric fencing, where you can keep hundreds of cattle in the area you want with very low investment for simple electric fencing. Now, what happened in the times when there were 60 million bison running around North America, there were grasslands with 8-9 meter deep topsoils. What happens when grass is overgrazed or animals are taken off a landscape is the grassland degenerates, the grass is eating its root reserves, and the soil is essentially getting thinner as carbon in the soil gets oxidized by the oxygen in the atmosphere, and we have CO2 and loss of topsoil. So now parts of America that are desertifying, that used to have 9 meter deep topsoils and a lot of carbon stored in the soil, now have 8-9 centimeters of soil, and all that carbon is causing global weirding up there. So everything about the first slide I showed you, how I define a regenerative enterprise, agriculture, it must sequester carbon. And there's no quicker way to do that than grazing animals on grasslands. Right? A tree is an old dendritic pattern, a branching pattern where sugar from the leaves has a very long pathway down through the root system of that plant into the soil. All plants release between 2 and 20% of their hard-earned sugar into the soil to feed microorganisms. They're swapping, they're symbiotically connected in this great web of soil life. But grasses are like super lane highways. They're like a big highway going into Tokyo with 20 lanes of traffic. Sugar goes straight into the soil. And so when I plant trees, I can sequester carbon as long as I don't burn that tree and release all that carbon again. But if it locks up the land from production for 80, 90 years. We need trees. We need a lot more trees in the landscapes, but we must understand the importance of grassland ecology. People don't really think so much about grasses because they're not very big. They're not so grand. We look at a 1,000-year oak tree and it's mind-blowing. You know, it's amazing to stand beneath great trees. People don't feel so moved standing next to grasses. But did you know that a big perennial bunch grass can live for 1,000 years? Single grass plant. 90% of that grass is in its root mass. This is the soil holding plant of the planet, grasses. They're extremely effective photosynthesizers. And what we can see with grasses is their meristems, their new growth, comes up at the base of the plant. They're designed to be chopped by a lawnmower or a cow, ideally. A cow is just a big protoplasmic composting machine, you could say. When it comes along and eats the grass, it allows these photovoltaic panels to see the sun, off it goes. And what happens if we keep animals in a fixed grazing pattern, which is how most animals on the planet are farmed today? Animals are put out in the fields and they're left there for the summer and they come in later. But what will happen is the cow will always take the sweet, juicy regrowth, right? And then the old grass going to seed that's gone rank is not so tasty for the cow. It's like onions and liver. The kid will always take ice cream and sweets over liver and tripe, right? And so will a cow. And what happens when the cow comes back too soon is it eats those juicy tips again, but the plant hasn't photosynthesized enough to replace the energy lost from its roots sending forth that shoot. So if we keep doing that all year, the plant is consuming its roots and the soil is getting thinner and thinner, okay? So it's really important that more people understand grassland ecology, because we hear statistics in the alternative movement about growing vegetables is sustainable, eating meat is not sustainable. This is true if we look at industrial agricultural models. It's totally the opposite when we look at regenerative agriculture systems. There's no more efficient way to harvest sunlight than through grasses, okay? I don't want to get into to that too much. It's just really important that we understand the importance of grasslands, because about 60 to 65% of the world's surface is now a desert or desertifying. And it's because humans have not understood overgrazing. We believe that overgrazing has been having too many animals on the landscape, and so we've taken them off the Great Plains of Africa, the Great Plains of North America, and we've caused desertification. Now, overgrazing of grass plants is purely about timing, how long a grass plant can recover before it's grazed again. And we can do that today with electric fencing, mimicking the predator species that kept animals moving in nature. Animals were kept moving by predator species like lions, wolves, etc. And they also benefited from moving continuously because they shit and urinate everywhere. So they need fresh forage. And they wouldn't come back to the same area for quite a long time. But it's easy to throw around numbers like 1 million or 50 million. We don't really know what that means. A herd of 60 million bison is, you know, I can't even picture what that would look like. But you can imagine they would trample all the old grass. They would break the old grass away from the new grass to let it photosynthesize. And that land would then not be grazed again for many months. And so it would recover and the root mass would deepen the topsoil again. So holistic management, Keyline Design, permaculture design, these are the three main parts of the framework with which we approach designing landscapes. And they all fit very seamlessly together. So we jump back to Keyline Design quickly, if that's okay. There's three main landscape components that define any watershed. We have main ridges, like on our hand here, off of which come primary ridges and primary valleys. And water always flows at 90 degrees to contour. That means water flows off ridges into valleys, and we find streams and rivers in valley systems. So Yeomans developed a pattern with which he could use this special keyline plow to change the way water moved in landscapes. Water needs to be under control, otherwise we get erosion. This plow goes into the ground and it cuts just a couple of inches below the root depth, and the roots will root a bit deeper that year. Then you come a bit deeper next year, a bit deeper again, and we can increase topsoil in this way. But we do this on a very specific geometrical pattern. Right? Here we have it's a big subject, and it's a subject that's been very misunderstood. So I'm going through this very quickly, but if you're interested in these things, I would suggest you look into them further in your own time. We create a pattern on mapping. We need good mapping to do good design, and nowadays that available mapping is getting better and better all the time. We're getting to a point where we can take a consumer drone that we can fly up in the air, take photos, and build 3D models of our farms for incredibly low amounts of investment. In the next few years, this will radically improve as well. But you see the dotted lines on this slide. We create a pattern to use this plow upon, following a very particular point in the landscape that Yeomans called a key point. Right? And it's a point where the land changes shape from convex to concave. And it's a point of deposition. It's a point where water starts collecting, soil particles start collecting, and he developed a whole pattern for designing farms around this system. And he defined the key point as the point where the contours get closer together in a primary valley, which is the valley coming off a main ridge in a watershed. And if you marked a contour line, a line of equal height above sea level through that point to the edges of the primary valley, and then followed parallel up and down hill, it creates a pattern that's off contour. And it's off contour pointing downhill towards the center of a ridge. Ridges you work in a different way. You start with the lowest contour on a ridge and work upwards. And we create a pattern like so on a computer where water looks like the lines here are falling. You see the cross marking the key point in the primary valley. The line running through that falls from the height of the valley. It falls to the center of the ridge line. So what we're actually able to do is make water travel a lot further through the land and take a lot longer moving through the land, and start to allow water landing as rain on the ridge centers to stay there on the ridge centers. Now, normally, the ridges are very dry areas of the landscape and the valleys are relatively wet. But if you look at the topographic map, the ridges are by far the biggest features in the landscape, which means most of the landscape is dry. Only a little bit of it is moist. So this is a method by very simply tickling the subsoil, soil being the lowest part of the scale of permanence I mentioned, the easiest thing to change. We can just tickle the subsoil and we can totally transform the way water moves in our landscapes. Okay, so we do this on computers nowadays because it's much quicker and easier. You can use free programs like this is Google Earth, and on Google Earth I can overlay a contour map as a photo image, and now I have a very good starting point for design. Now Google Earth Pro is now free, and there's a lot of powerful design tools in it. You can measure areas and lines, so you can start to design, okay, I want a windbreak on the south border of my farm. Oh, it's 917 meters long, and I want 3 plants per meter. Now I know I need this many trees. Right? So we can do designs for farms very quickly with modern technology. It's very useful. Mapping is coming along. We need good mapping. Like this map of our farm here is a 50 centimeter contour map. And one of the benefits of living in a rich country is that the whole of Sweden has been laser mapped to 50 centimeter accuracy. Most countries don't have that. But we can start to do that much cheaper with the developments in technology that are coming along now. This is a EB drone from a startup company, SenseFly, and you throw this thing in the air, having clicked the corners of the property you want to map on Google Earth, and it measures down to 10 centimeter accuracy and can map 40 square kilometers in one flight, and it flies automatically. You don't even need to know how to fly a model aeroplane. It's quite expensive. This is a tool for a mapping company, but it means you can hire someone to make a map relatively cheaply that would have cost a fortune in the past. This technology is changing really fast. This is a consumer drone that I have. It costs maybe 400 euros nowadays, and I can use photos I take of my land in a photogrammetry program and build a 3D model of my farm and then slice it into contour maps. It's not a very accurate thing yet, but give it 1 or 2 years and we'll be able to make 20 centimeter contour maps for, you know, €1,000 investment, and then I can take this to sub-Saharan Africa and make them maps for nothing. So it's incredible what's happening. And so that explains the pattern of these trees that you see laid out on our farm. This is last autumn when the frost just came. So we've laid the trees out in a pattern that changed the way this farm will be used for generations. If you give it 10 years, you will not be able to get through these tree lanes without a bulldozer. It means even if we leave the farm, someone else will have to use the farm in this pattern in a way that optimizes water. Right? So we have water sitting in the middle of the ridge shapes where it's never sat in geological history before. Here's a couple of slides from other Keyline farms. Mark Shepard's New Forest Farm, Wisconsin. He wrote a book called Restoration Agriculture, which I'm just writing in the text box there. It's a really great book. It starts to get really good after chapter 7, I would say. And this is a farm I've been working with and a sugar mill in Mexico at a place called San Ricardo, and their other mill, Granulot. And this is a really interesting Keyline design. So this is like some of the patterns of Keyline design, using the shape of the landscape to allow us to pattern farm designs rather than imposing our ideas on top of the landscape. Everything about this is about controlling water. This is what happens when raindrops hit bare soil. They explode the clay particles up into the air, and they fall back on the soil surface, and clay particles are flat platelets, so that caps the soil. That's compaction. There's nothing worse than bare soil. It just leads to severe problems with water runoff and degradation. When water's not under control, erosion happens. And soil, we lose 1 millimeter of topsoil per hectare. That's 10 tons per hectare. And it's not coming back anytime soon, you could say. And here, the result of plowing up and downhill. Why do people plow up and downhill? Mainly because it's more comfortable to sit in a tractor rather than going around a slope. But you'd think someone would have come up with a simple engineering fix for this problem. What happens when we plow up and downhill is we make really fast pathways for water to carry topsoil away down the hill. And this is some of the results of that. We're using different ways to deal with water here. Other than Keyline Design, we've installed a ram pump. So we have water, we have 2 streams running through the property, and we take water out of the stream along a pipe that falls on a 1 to 200 incline and fills up this IBC tank, and then falls 8 meters of height to this ram pump. This is it's a 140-year-old pump that uses just falling water pressure to pump a small amount of water very high up in the air. And we can feed the entire farm water supply with a pump that requires no electricity or electrics. I see someone's just highlighted Ben Falk's book, The Resilient Farm and Homestead. This is a fantastic book, and Ben is a super cool dude. I really recommend you buy that book and read it. Similar climate to here, although quite much further south in latitude. And yeah, I really love Ben's work. This supplies a water pipe that goes around our farm. So if we want to be able to move animals in a way that mimics nature, in a way that stimulates the regeneration of grasses, then we need to be able to get water to animals. Farming essentially is about remembering to carry stuff with you every time you walk somewhere. It's about being able to respond to anything that needs your attention at any time of day or night, and trying to shave time off all the jobs you have to do. There's a lot of myths in the permaculture world that we can design these wonderful systems and everything will function perfectly itself and we'll never have to work again and food will be falling off the trees at us. This is, nonsense. If you want high-yielding farms, you work very hard. This is the way it is. We can make systems that are resilient and robust and more energy efficient, but farming is hard work, let's face it. One thing we can do to save a lot of labor is moving water around plastic piping. It's one of the best uses of plastic pipe. So we have this ring beam of water all the way around the farm with these quick release valves, and we can plug in animals with this air hose and quick release valves, and we can reach animals anywhere on the farm very easily. So we never have to carry water around or check water. It's always automatically filling from our main supply line. Really good investment. We jump into animal systems because we're very inspired by Polyphase Farm in Virginia. We're not interested in free-range animals. We're interested in time-controlled grazing, mimicking how animals are on the move in nature and designing complementary systems where each animal is working to the benefit of the other animals on the farm. So Polyphase have pioneered salad bar beef, pastured eggs, pastured broiler chickens, and we use some of those models here, which I'll show you shortly. We plan our grazing with holistic management grazing planning, and this is a chart where we document for the year ahead where the animals are going to be throughout the entire year, because our job is managing every single grass plant on the farm, making sure we don't overgraze any of our grasses. It looks very complicated if you're not familiar with it, but basically it's a planning chart so that you can plan ahead for the season's growth, because grass is growing at a different rate throughout the year, but it's also different amounts of nutrients in the grass at different times of the year, so we need to plan how long can animals stay in one field throughout the year. So that's a whole thing that you can find out more about on the Savory Institute website, or people run trainings in this thing particularly. Then we do a lot of monitoring on our land, because something missing in the permaculture world is documentation. Very few people are really running permaculture projects to make a living and producing food for sale. So there's very little documented evidence of, is this economically viable to do like this? And there's very little data produced in a research manner. So people are saying, okay, this technique is really good. Hugelculture is really good. But there's very little evidence to compare, well, is it any better than traditional vegetable growing? Yeah, maybe it is, maybe it's not, but we need data to show that, particularly in a position that we're in where we're saying we're a demonstration site. So we do a lot of research, a lot of recording of information. Here's one way that we record how our grassland is changing. We also measure soil organic carbon. We also take transects throughout our fields, and we monitor the insects that the chickens are eating. We monitor how much forage is available in each field and how does that change over the years. This was our eggmobile from last year. We built out of scrap wood for 40 euros and tested how it works to have laying hens here. Now we have 350 hens and a new eggmobile. But you see the graph in the top left-hand corner. We walked around looking in the cow pats after the cows had been passed every 6 hours, and we monitored what type of insects were in those cow pats. And what we found out was after 96 hours, the level of maggots from the flies was at its highest, and the level of dung beetles, which are really beneficial for us, were at their lowest. So we decided if we bring in the laying hens at this point, they will eat all the fly larvae, the maggots, that would otherwise hatch and create a problem for the cows. And they're really rich in omega-3, 6, and 9, really good for the hen health. And we won't damage our invertebrate population. And so these little chickens do their job, and after 5 minutes outside in the morning, there's no cow pat. Those chickens have become a protoplasmic muck spreader, sanitizing the pasture and giving us eggs as a waste product, rather than us burning diesel to run a machine to do that job. So how do we allow animals to do their work of the farmer for us? And we do all this with super low cost, simple mobile structures built out of often free wood from a timber mill that's knocked over a pallet of wood and they can't use it. They chip it up and burn it because they only have machines. They don't have people working there. And so we go and collect the free wood and we build mobile infrastructure. You see the solar panel there. All of our fencing is run off very high quality mobile solar units. And you see broilers in the background. My daughter there is on chicken duty in the morning. And we find multiple uses for our structures. With such a short growing season, it makes a lot of sense to have a polytunnel or a greenhouse here. And in the winter, when we're not getting food for the people because there's no one visiting the farm at this time of year, this is where the chickens live. And it means we don't have to pay to use electricity to heat the chickens in the winter. And so we're using all the structures in as many functions as possible to save us money on investments. We bought this 10-hectare farm. We've spent about what it would cost to buy the farm and do it up so far. It's cost less than a house in where I come from, like a modest family house. So it's, for the relative wealth of the country we live in, we're doing this at a very low budget. This is the boiler pens we've made for 40, 50 euros for a mobile setup that can run 50 boiler birds at a time. Super low investment, and it's the sort of model that young people can take on and easily, excuse me, and easily mimic this and scale it up to however much land they have. Something we're trying to work with a lot of younger people that come to us is, how do we start up farm enterprises on rented land, on borrowed land, so that we don't even need to invest huge amounts of money. And you can set up a pastured boiler enterprise for maybe 5,000 euros, 10,000 euros. And this is something that can get someone into farming. It's got a quick cash flow in terms of farm enterprises. We can raise really high quality pastured birds in 8 or 9 weeks. There's very few things you can do on a farm that give you a high value return that quickly. And so this is a model that can be adapted. Something we've just spent time doing this spring is building a slaughterhouse on farm for 10,000 euros. And this is quite an innovation here, because the cheapest model we can find is about 100,000 euros here in Sweden. And we like to take responsibility for this whole process, using our wastes and putting them through compost to put the nutrient back on the land. We shouldn't be allowing any nutrient to leave our farm if possible. When we grow vegetables and export them to market, we're exporting nutrient off our land. With grazing animals, we're able to keep all that nutrient on the land, except for a very small amount, if we're able to make biochar with bones from cattle or whatever. In this case, with chickens, we are buying grain in, which is not sustainable in the long term. We buy grains from a local organic farmer, small-scale farmer, and that won't exist. It's based on oil-based agriculture, even if it's small-scale organic agriculture. So one day that won't be possible, in which case we'll change our production and produce geese or ducks. But right now in Sweden, people eat a lot of chicken. They don't eat a lot of ducks and geese. So we have to be practical and pragmatic. We need to produce high quality food that people actually eat here. So this is a project that's just finishing, and we're training people how to raise chickens from scratch, from the beginning all the way through the process to finishing a finished product that they learn to market and sell and take care and deal with the waste. We also have pastured eggs. So this is an eggmobile that I set out in the winter with a goal for 2,000 euros to build an eggmobile that carried 350 hens and could be moved by a quad bike, an ATV. So it had to weigh less than 1 ton, and it needed to have a mobile feeder and waterer that could carry 2 weeks' feed minimum as it moved around the farm. And I've been posting about that on our Facebook page and things, but basically I bought an old car trailer and built this thing up in the winter, and it's been working fantastic for us. We produce about 6 tons of eggs a year, and these birds follow the cows and the sheep on the farm in the rotational grazing system that we have. So we also have some meat sheep for our own consumption. We have a couple of dairy cows for our own consumption. We have bees coming this week, and we'll have quite a lot of bees in the future. And so we're trying to meet the needs of the people. Now, last year we served about 10,000 meals here. And we have a lot of people coming to the farm for open days and for courses and trainings we do. So we're trying to produce some things just to feed ourselves. Some things are going to be for sale in the future. Right now we're focused on meat chickens and eggs because we only have 4 hectares of grassland. So we can't have large amounts of sheep. We don't have space. You need several hundred sheep in Sweden to make that a profitable enterprise. Excuse me. But what we can do with chickens is do that at a scale that can be profitable. One thing that we're doing that will be a future income for the farm is tree planting, with mainly apple, pear, plum, cherry, and a wide diversity of berry fruits like raspberries, black currants, white currants, red currants, gooseberries, honeyberries, beautiful crops like this. Also hazel, and we have some nut plants that are like nut trees that are more of an experimental project for my own stimulation. So when we plant trees, we need to consider the environment trees need to grow in. Now, most of our crop trees are not intended to be planted into grass. They live in fungal rich soils with a lot more organic matter and a lot higher level of fungi to bacteria. So our preparation for planting trees into pasture, because we don't want to use chemicals to clear the grasses, is to come along with our keyline plow and rip nearly 1 meter down in the ground to decompact the soil under the trees so that they can root quickly. Then we use the vegetable bed maker to make vegetable beds that mean we can come along and plant trees bare with our hands and not need to use tools like spades to plant it. And then we put in lots of food for fungi. We put woody mulches, fungal composts, rock dusts, all these lovely things like kelp and molasses that are food for fungi. And we planted about 4,500 trees and berry bushes last year, and we just walked away from that. We've done that on this keyline patterning, which means water is equally distributed around the farm, so we don't need to water any of our new trees. And this year we're getting a lot of fruits and berries. Here you can see the farm when we bought it last April, and then a couple of weeks later in May when we had finished and mulched all the tree plantings, and then in July and August as those systems settled down and started filling out with cover crops. So the process of that planting was we buy bare root trees because that's the cheapest way to buy trees. And you can only buy them in the winter time. I'm sure you have the same in Poland with bare root plants. It's very easy to send them in the post because you're not sending big lumps of soil around. And we prepare the ground to make it less compacted for the trees. And we use a cover crop with about 50 different perennial plant species, things that fix nitrogen for the trees, things that cover the soil and repair it quickly, things that attract insects and pollinators for the trees. And so it's kind of like forest gardening, which I'm sure you've heard of, but in a linear form. It's a little bit more organized because farms need to be a little bit more efficient. Otherwise, you can't walk around harvesting some gooseberries over here and some at the top of the field there. We need to be able to harvest efficiently when we do things at a bigger scale, obviously. But it's also the beauty of Keyline Design is that Keyline Design works parallel. If you've ever seen a contoured planted farm, contours are never parallel. And that doesn't work with farm machinery or mobile fencing or mobile broiler pens because they're the same width all the time. So by having parallel lines around the landscape, it means the whole flow of the farm works very well. This is what the tree lanes looked like about a month after planting. A huge amount of diversity, and a lot of insects are moving back in, and a lot of bird species are moving back in now as well, because we're one of the few farms around here where life is allowed to go on as it wishes in a way. We're protecting certain areas of our farm and planting very diverse species in, and not spraying chemicals everywhere. This is a savanna planting of nut trees. We have walnut species, chestnut species, pecan species, and we're taking nuts from institutions and research projects around the world, trying to find really hardy nuts that grow this far. These trees are planted at, there's double the amount of trees than there will be in the future, because we know a lot of these trees are just probably not going to be hardy enough, and we'll have to pull them out and plant another one. The trees, if the question on the chat, someone's saying, are these planted too close? These are semi-dwarfing fruit trees planted to still allow 40% light into the understory when they're fully grown. And so they're not planted, they're planted very precisely for that reason. And these plants are double the spacing, like half of these trees will be removed as we know which trees are good for the future. This is a long-term project. It's not a part of the farm that will ever make us money. It's a part of the farm that's for my stimulation, because I'm really determined to find some nuts that have strong enough genetics to live here, because institutions will not do that, universities will not do that, corporations, governments will not do that. People, wacky people doing wonderful, weird things like ourselves are the people that will do that. So someone's got to do it, and I'm happy to try. We use Mark Shepard's stun, sheer total utter neglect. We plant hundreds of nut trees as seeds, and maybe 1 out of 100 is good, and that one will go in the field. And that's the way it is. If we try and mollycoddle plants, if we try and look after plants that aren't strong enough to live here, then we create a lot of work for ourselves. And the nut tree can live 1,000 years. So I don't want any old nut tree. I want the nut tree I want the nut trees that will survive here without my help. This is based on the work of Luther Burbank, who developed a lot of our modern agricultural crops through neglect and not caring for them, and observing which ones did well without his care, which, you know, is common sense. A child can understand that. I wonder, Agatha, could you maybe respond, like, how long have I got now? I'm still about 2/3 of the way through. Do I have another 10 minutes or so? Maybe someone could let me know. Okay, I'm going on. Here's our kitchen gardens in the farm center. Okay, I've got some time. Okay, I can talk all night, you see. This is the trouble. These are no-dig beds. So we've been looking at different ways of growing vegetables. And interestingly, no-dig beds have been shown in different research to be just as productive as some of the other good vegetable growing methods, like double digging, which is a lot of work but is very productive. We've made lasagna beds, like mulch beds in the past. We've made all types of experiments, but no-dig beds seem to work very well. And you do this just by laying newspaper or cardboard on top of grass and covering it with a good 10 centimeters of well-rotted cow manure is ideal, or horse manure. But you want to leave that over the winter. It's best to do this in autumn, and then it'll be good in the spring. And we cover that with straw or plastic or whatever you've got lying around, really, and then peel that off in the spring and plant into this and mulch it with straw, ideally, some woody mulch. It's always better to use natural mulch because it breaks down and becomes part of the soil. But sometimes, like we have 1,000 square meters of beds, we need to use plastic sometimes, because we also have couch grass, the one that creeps underneath and pops back up. And there's 2 ways to get rid of that. One is covering it for a very long time with something like plastics, and one is pigs, who love to eat it because it's full of sugar. Ink in newspaper is been, it used to be toxic, but it's for a very long time in Europe, most newspaper ink is made with vegetable inks, and you've got a lot more pollutants in your water supply and food in supermarkets. I wouldn't really be worried with that. The best place to put anything is through soil microorganisms. They're the great deconstructors of the natural world. But yeah, I wouldn't be concerned about newspaper print here. I don't know what your newspapers are printed with, but I imagine it's similar. It's not a big problem. The soil, it's a synthesizer. Like, if we want to clean things, we use water systems and soil systems and perennial plant systems. These things are just great at breaking down pretty much everything. In Fukushima recently, they've been seeing, like in Chernobyl, there's fungi on the walls of the buildings that can eat radioactivity. And we know that fungi can break down hydrocarbons, all these things. Like, there's always some niche creature in an ecosystem that can deal with any problem we can create. You just got to find all of them. I'm going to talk about, shiny magazines is not good. Like, I would use newspapers, or you can buy Hessian sacking. You can buy rolls of paper for this kind of purpose. But really, whatever is practical, whatever you've got your hands on. The reason we put newspaper or cardboard down is to just try and block out these grasses, because we have these creeping rhizo grasses that travel underground and pop back up. So you can mulch your vegetable bed, and then they'll travel out of your vegetable bed and pop up on the side. So it's a never-ending battle. So we use wood chips for the paths, because this is also able to stop the creeping grasses coming up in the pathways. The place on the pic, this is my house and root cellar and greenhouse and the yurts. We use the yurts for a dining room and classroom in the summer. And you can see the farm is off to the right there, the fields that we looked at. So this is our farm center in the permaculture sense, zone 1, you could say, and this is where we spend a lot of our time. Creeping grass can travel more than 20 or 30 centimeters in my experience. But you can get rid of it. It's full of sugars, and pigs is the best way. I would fence pigs in and let them run for a year, and they'll eat all of those roots. So it's our second year now. I'm going to show you various things that we do with soils near the end, so I'm not going to talk more about soil just this moment. This is our farm chef from last year, and on these no-dig beds we produced a lot of vegetables, enough food for 5 families with fairly low inputs. And we also glean a lot of foods from the wild. Sweden is full of wild foods, berries and mushrooms in the forest. The mushroom harvest you see there was from, a short morning in August, and there's 50 kilos of mushrooms there. You have the same ones in Poland, I know. And we eat the pike here. They're fantastic eating if they're cooked properly. Wild berries, you could collect hundreds of tons of wild berries if you had enough people. And wild leaves, super greens, super berries, we've got it all here. It's kind of in autumn when the harvest comes, you kind of wonder why we even farm, because there's so much food walking or sitting around in the forests in Sweden. Yeah, these are nettles. We make a lot of stuff with nettles. We also take a lot of waste. I told you about the free timber. In the top left here, you see us taking a trailer of timber. That pile is about 150 meters long. The timbers are about 5 or 6 meters long. And that pile has got hundreds of thousands of euros of timber going to get chipped up and burnt because the machines couldn't pick it up and stack it up again. So we built everything with it. Free wood chips, free eggmobiles, free boiler pans, etc. And this is the way farming needs to be. We need to get a bit creative and innovative, which the permaculture world is very good at. Here's a great website, farmhack.net. And people are creating homemade solutions. Rather than spending money on machines they only use once a year, they'll find a way to hack an old machine or make a bicycle-powered version and then open source that online so other people can learn from that. It's a really important part of what we do, because I'm living in one of the most expensive countries on the planet, save perhaps Norway and Singapore. Sweden is incredibly expensive. If we had gone out and invested the money we have shopping around, I'm from England and I go to England regularly, so I buy a lot of materials from wholesale companies that I have connections with. I would have spent 5, 6, 7, 8 times as much doing up this farm so far if I'd bought everything in Sweden. So we need to find creative ways to lower input costs. Like getting into debt is not a good way to make money, you could say. How do you make farming profitable? Well, you don't get into debt, you don't buy so much stuff, and you take care of your own food needs, and then you don't need to make much money. I'll answer some of these questions in a moment. This is the global eco-village construction set from Open Source Ecology over in America, and they're open sourcing homemade tools, the sort of tools you would need to make a eco-village or a human settlement, and they're making these in modular, bolted, made out of scrap metal parts, as it were, so that people around the world can go to the dump yard, find pieces that they can build useful tools with. And yeah, Martin is a super cool dude. There's some of these things are not that useful yet. You know, the tractor and digger, it's just not good enough. We need tractors that can pull keyline plows. We need tractors that can do certain jobs. And the technology is not quite good enough yet, but it's an amazing project and super inspiring. So you can check that one out. Thinking of low-cost infrastructure, this project I showed you in Mexico, when I was there recently, we designed and built this very simple tree planting machine, kind of mimicking the tree plantings that I had here. This is a sugar-growing region. This farm is part of 2 ranches attached to a sugar mill processing 1 million tons of sugar a year. And the owner of the mill is an incredibly she's an incredible lady. She's one of the only sugar bosses in South America. Most sugar mills are owned by, you know, very rich businessmen living in Mexico City who have very little care for the people involved. The sugar industry is a slave trade. It always has been, and it still is. You get paid about $8 to cut a ton of sugar cane by hand. It's pretty treacherous work. And sugar cane just rips nutrients out the ground. And the soils are depleted all over this region, the waters are polluted, and people are realizing, hang on, we've got to do things differently. So the lady that owns this mill, she's pretty radical. She stood up to the NAFTA agreement. They took her mill off her for 6 years because she refused to go by some of the NAFTA arrangements, which basically mean you have to sell sugar at lower than the cost of production to America for Coca-Cola and all these things. And she refused that. They took her mill off her for 6 years, extracted billions of dollars, and she won it back in the end. So she's now really, her biggest thing is caring for the people that work here. There's several thousand people employed here. And she wants to create model farms that will live into the future. And when I got there this year, they were planting trees with an auger, like a screw on a tractor, but they're planting tens of thousands of trees. And so I wanted to help them speed up their tree planting process. So this is like a keyline plow. It's got a shank that lifts compaction under the ground in the middle of the lane where the tree will be, so the tree can root really fast. And then it uses these discs to cut a mound, a bit like the tree beds at our place. And these guys in the workshop just knocked up this machine, and these guys are doing some epic work. It's in the tropics, so things go really fast here, and they've got a beautiful keyline project set up there. But it's low cost. If you go out and buy a machine for tree planting, you can easily spend $10,000. This one costs $200, and that's what we need to do all the way along the way. Like, we need to start saving money by getting creative. And when we plant perennial plants like this, there's not just fruits and nut crops, there's things like mushroom crops. This is one of our interns just planted up 100 meters of mushroom logs. But also from wood chips, we can make things like Jean-Pan compost. Jean-Pan is dead now, but some of you will have probably heard of him. He was using wood chip alone, wood chip and water, to heat water to 65 degrees Celsius at a rate of 4 liters a minute, and producing biogas to power his car at the same time. So I went to stay with, you can look Jean-Pan up on YouTube and you'll see videos of his experiments in the 70s. And I went to stay with his nephew in France to find out why is no one really doing this anymore, because this looks like a truly regenerative technology. Your waste product is farm scale compost. That's a pretty awesome place to be in. So we made an experiment last year in Sweden and made a pile of about 30 cubic meters. This has got 2 pipes of 200 meters inside. There's a pipe inside the other pipe. And I can see kind of here, yeah, Jean-Pan's book there. It's got some information about his experiments there. This pile, the thermometer here, is only reaching 40 centimeters inside the pile. The outer 80 centimeters we anticipated as being insulation. It was over 65 degrees Celsius for 16 months, and we have minus 25 in the winter. These things rock. It's very hard to get enough wood chip to do this. Even better than looking at Jean Pan's work is looking up the Germans who are leading the way in this, nativepower.de, and they've installed about 25, 30 of these into people's homes, looking at their current electric bills or gas bills, and they plumb this into your existing system. Amazing. It's just wood chip and water. A lot of people now are doing this with animal manures and other things, but Jean Pan's method is just wood chip and water. The wood chip needs to be very fine. The wood must be fresh within 1 or 2 weeks cut. And you need to use no more than 10% pine or conifer species. They don't compost, they're too sour. And you need a lot of water. Like 1 cubic meter of wood chip can absorb 700 liters of water, but it takes about 3 days to do that. So we set up a sump pump, collecting the water and pumping it round and round and round for days. But that thing got hot, within a couple of weeks. We can combine that with, we're getting hot water to heat a barn or heat a house. We're getting farm scale compost, and we can combine that with things like wallopinis, greenhouses sunken into the ground that use the natural heat sink of the earth to keep them from freezing in the winter. This is one in Sweden it's now finished, actually. I just haven't got a photo of it. But we can lay underfloor heating with a Jean Pan pile and have a hot, subtropical greenhouse in Sweden producing compost at the same time. It's pretty awesome. Wood, it's got to be mixed species is best, using the whole tree from the top to the bottom, because there's different nutrients stored at different places in the tree. But a mixture of trees is good. We took 7 or 8 large lorry loads from a tree surgeon, and it was good for the tree surgeon. They got paid to take the wood away, and we got free wood. But we had apple and oak and all kinds of different woods in there. You need to have a wood chipper that can cut the wood into quite fine particles, and they need to be consistent and fine, because it's about surface area, just like any composting. The pile was outside in minus 20, 25, yeah. Probably minus 25 for a couple of weeks, but below, in winter it's cold, minus 10 for 2 or 3 months. But the heat is inside the pile, so the outside of the pile is just not really doing anything. The inside is hot. But yeah, it's compost will work in any temperature because the heat is coming from the middle there. But deciduous trees are best for sure. The conifers and pines are too resinous and sour. They don't go well. So we need to understand that quite a lot about the soil food web to run these systems, to build topsoil and protect these systems. Now, I'm jumping into soil now, jumping on from Jean Pan compost. Everyone's probably familiar with Elaine Ingham, Dr. Elaine Ingham's work. She's one of the leading soil scientists, and I'll just type her name here. But look at her work with the soil food web stuff. And these are the main soil organisms that we can show what we're doing with our compost teas, by looking in a microscope. If you want to look at your compost and your compost teas, you need a microscope with 400 times magnification and binocular vision, so that you're not straining like all evening. You want to have 2 eyepieces, so binoculars, 10 times magnification eyepieces, and maybe a 10 and a 40 times objective, so that you can scan around a slide. And a 40 times objective with a 10 times eyepiece gives you 400 magnification. That's good enough for seeing these kind of organisms. And you need to have an iris diaphragm, and you need to have a light source so that you can shine light through it. So you need a fairly good microscope, but you can get them for about 150 euros. And with that, we can actually look at the things we create, like our composts or our biofertilizers, and we can see what we're actually doing, because otherwise we don't really know what we're making. I'm just seeing the question about the wallopini. No, we haven't built that on our farm. We're going to build an attached greenhouse on our house, but it's just going to be sunk into the ground about 80 centimeters just below the frost line. This one is in Sweden. It's near Stockholm. It's in one climate zone higher than ours, but still pretty cold. And it's working very well for them, yes. They use glass on the walls, and they use a type of plastic from Keyline greenhouses in England. It's like bubble wrap, but very thick, strong stuff. And this is excellent material if you can get hold of it. The supplier is in Germany, but they're not necessarily open to public customers. But it's like that bubble wrapping. You wrap things in where you can squish the bubbles, but big ones. And it comes in 2-meter panels, and 4 grown men can stand on a 2x2 panel. It won't break. It's super strong, and it's really good stuff. It's cheaper than greenhouse material and more expensive than polytunnel material, but it's got a 25-year warranty. Hemp, not sure about hemp. Isolation, yeah, hemp isolation is good stuff. So sheep wool, I'm not sure what that's referring to, but yeah. So yeah, when we're working with soils, we're working with 4 main groups of organisms: nematodes, fungi, bacteria, protozoa, 5, and arthropods. And there's different trophic orders. You remember trophic pyramids at biology class. So nematodes go from the most tiny root feeders, some of the things that cause problems to our crops, all the way to higher order nematodes that zoom around the soil water layer, eating 10,000 bacteria in a day. And fascinating stuff. This is the sort of stuff that gets kids excited about farming, when we can show them organisms swimming around, biting the face off another organism. It's like computer games. They love that kind of thing. And, you know, farming is about chemistry, biology, and all these wonderful subjects all mixed together. Like, we're growing up in a world where, like in England, we call a doctor a general specialist. I don't even know what that means. What we need is specialist generalists. You know, we need people that are good at many different things, but not experts in any of them. We don't need to be experts in anything. We just need to know enough about every single discipline that we can create holistic systems, and that feels important. But soils, and understanding the biology and chemistry in soils, is fundamental to being able to deal with agriculture. And understanding how systems change through succession, that process of change in communities, in ecologies over time, where we have bacterial soils in our vegetable gardens, in our grasslands, either bacterially dominated or fungi to bacteria balanced, through to our woody systems, which are fungal heavy. It's much harder to grow fungi than it is bacteria. If you take bacteria and you give them a load of sugar and oxygen, they reproduce like bacteria. But fungi is harder to grow. They're a lot more unstable. They need a lot more refined nutrients. So when I was showing you about the tree lanes, we need to put the food in for the tree, not for the trees, for the fungi, because we're planting trees into grasslands. Grasslands are bacterial. Trees want to grow in fungal soil. So everything we put on our trees, rock dust, kelp, molasses, kelp is seaweed, sugarcane molasses, fungal compost, these are all things that inoculate fungi and help fungi grow. Woody mulch, wood chips, this is what fungi eat, right? Rocks and wood is what fungi are eating and swapping it with sugar from the tree. So we need to know about different patterns in different habitats if we want them to be able to thrive together. We run 8-week internships at the farm, where we go really deep into the things that we see people need if they want to design for larger landscapes professionally, and if they want to start a farm like this kind of thing themselves. And they've just been through Soil Week this week, and we're making all kinds of preparations, from biofertilizers that mimic the anaerobic digestion in a cow's gut to give us an NPK replacement, like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium replacement. It's the main agricultural chemical. We can make that with stuff lying around our farm. We can turn animal bones back to soluble phosphorus. Everyone's heard of peak oil, peak water. Now we have peak phosphorus. It's a mined mineral that's in short supply. But we can use the phosphorus in bones rather than throwing them off as a waste product. We can charcoal them with silica or dissolve charcoal bones in vinegar and make soluble phosphorus. In the middle photo at the top with the frying pan and the pot there, we're making calphos with eggshell, soluble calcium and phosphorus. In the top corner, we're using cooked rice and Japanese farming methods to collect indigenous microorganisms from the forest in the photo below. And then we can breed them on wheat bran and turn them into large-scale compost for putting the native indigenous microorganisms from our forests into our tree lanes to help them in all kinds of ways. We also make a lot of biochar. Someone, I think, posted about, do we use terra preta or something? Yes, we make biochar. This region was famous for making biochar. We use a very simple pit method, just because it's super easy to do. And we then crush that into powder and put it in compost. If you don't know about biochar, there's our friend Albert Bates wrote a book called The Biochar Solution. You could read. It's a great book. He's a great guy. But biochar is a fractal pattern. When you zoom into it, you can see little pores in the cell walls. And then you can zoom into them, and within those holes, there's more holes. And then you can zoom into them, and there's even more holes. But these are the microscopic condominiums that bacteria and microorganisms can start living inside, like a little hotel. So what we do to make charcoal biochar is we put it in powder into our composts, and we charge it up with life, and then we apply that all over our soils, our garden beds, or in compost teas and sprays that we put around the land. And that's a very stable form of carbon that can stay in the soil for a very long time. There's lots of research papers about biochar being used straight, being used through composts. There's lots of research being done on using it in deep litter systems in animal bedding to capture ammonia and keep nutrients on the farm. So we have all these solutions, and what I like to really show people in like the courses that we run is that we already have all the solutions we need. It's always going to be the biological solutions or the ecological systems approaches that will be the cheapest, the most safe, low risk, resilient ways to deal with the problems we have on Earth today. And it's centered around building soil and producing good food. Like the reason permaculture is called permanent agriculture is that we're all sitting around eating industrially produced food, or most of us are. And, you know, even here growing a lot of food, we still buy some food from the stores. One day I don't think we'll need to, but right now we do. And agriculture is where the big changes will come, because most land is owned by farmers and most destruction is happening through farming. So this is why my focus professionally is on agriculture, because I believe this is where the biggest change can come. There's a lot of people focused on urban agriculture and small scale, small holding stuff, but there's less people focused on how do we sort agriculture out, and yet many more people rely on agriculture. So this is my commitment. I'm going to start wrapping up here, and I can answer some questions if people have. But just to recap, like I mentioned, the regenerative agriculture, it's got to build soil. Now we can do that with grazing animals. We can do that with vegetable gardening. We can do that with Keyline Design. We can do that with silver pastures, putting trees into systems. There's many ways we can build soil. It doesn't matter what your preference is, whether you want to raise animals, raise vegetables. There's ways to do it that build soil. We need a management framework that can deal with the complexity of working with finances, working with ecosystems, working with people. People are the hardest bit, people and money. You know, most projects I've ever been to, they're not stuck for creative ideas. They're stuck because they don't have enough money and they can't get along with each other. This is the same all over the world. So we need new ways to deal with human conditioning. And obviously there's people working on that from all different angles. But we need management frameworks that deal with complexity so that we're anticipating the widest possible view and thinking for the long term. Actions we take on the land today that will leave this farm, in our case, in a better condition than it was. Because why would my daughter or son take this farm on? Well, if I left them with thriving habitats, with beautifully managed landscapes, with animals bred for this specific climate, and a thriving business that supports local people and brings enough money to live a high quality of life, then they might well take it on. But if I take everything out of the soil and grow wheat year after year and plow the soil up and cut the trees down and sell them wholesale, why would my child want to take this on? Of course they wouldn't. So we must have a management system that can see into the future also. We need to mimic ecosystem processes. I've showed you some ways that we use ecosystem processes and mimic nature as much as we can. Obviously, it's never going to be a complete mimic of nature, but we can do as much as we can, and that's all we can do. We can try and use local inputs like recycling wastes and sell food locally and process our wastes on site, even in agricultural systems. We can do things with small machines, not big tractors and big debts. We can do it by crowdsourcing, by running education, by running workshops rather than taking big bank loans. We can get our customers engaged so they get excited about their food supply. And you see some of the great farms are bringing their sons and daughters and their family to come and harvest the products from the farm, and they're paying a premium price for the experience of doing that. So you've just sold something for more than you could sell it to a shop, and they've come and picked it all for you. It's common sense that this makes sense, because this is where intimacy is happening. This is where I look at my customer in the face and they know me and they trust me. And I would have to do something to really break that trust to make them not come back, because they can't get that experience anywhere else around here. So this is real food security, certified by customers. Open farm gates. Hey, you want to come and see how your food's produced? You're welcome. Come and have a look for yourself. Come and walk around, see for yourself, ask me questions, no problem. You can't do that in a lot of farms nowadays. Most farms say, danger, keep out, this is a farm, or warning, pesticides being sprayed. This is the way it is. Everyone's got to be benefiting. This is the natural pattern of everything in this universe. Everything I study in ecology is working for the benefit of the whole. Every single microbe, every single plant, everything functions to drive succession on. Everything wants to benefit the whole, because it knows, and you could say, it relies fully on the full beneficial expression of everything else. And that's the same for humans in my experience too. And we need to develop an understanding of multiple forms of capital and the abundance that we can create, because we make so many decisions based just on money. But there are obviously many forms of capital. You could look up 8 forms. I'm going to write that here. As my friend Ethan Rowland's and Gregory Landau's work. But the first book defining what is a regenerative enterprise. And so it all centers around these things. I hope that's highlighted and inspired you in some way. And it's all based around building soil and looking after the resources that are in our hands, so that there's something worth inheriting for our children, as it were. Site not found. I'll look for that in a moment. This is just a short plug, because I'll be in Poland in July with my daughter, and we're going to be running a permaculture design course, which is a very intensive 11-day introduction to the sorts of things we're talking about, but how to do them and how to look at the whole picture from scratch, how to intelligently take any piece of land and design that, break it down into manageable parts so we can create land plans and move forward to create these wonderful visions that we probably all have and share. We need pragmatic, practical, doable solutions, and that's our focus. So we'll be there for 11 days in July, and for any of you interested in that, there's, I think, links might pop up or something. There's some links here I can leave. But yeah, it's a rare chance that I'll be away from my farm. We try and run our courses as as affordably as we can. But living in Sweden, we have a 60% goes to taxes, and it's very hard to do things any cheaper than we are here. So it's a chance to take a training with me if you're interested at a lower rate than we can offer here in Sweden. If you're interested in what we do, you can see our website. You see Hannah there, who's the real boss. And yeah, you're welcome here at some point if you can make it to Sweden. It's not the cheapest place to get to, but it's a very wonderful place to be in the summer, and we'll gladly show people around if they make it this far. Yeah, thanks so much for your attention tonight, and I'm willing to be around to address questions or whatever feels a benefit to you.
Richard, I have one question, because we would like to know something more about course in Kopaniec. Could you tell us about program step by step, how it will be there?
Yeah, it's oh, there you go.
Yeah. It's the poster.
It's the best thing. I was trying to go back a slide because I could link you to, yeah, here it is. I'm not sure if I can copy and paste stuff here or not, but I can do that. I can do that on the internet. Like, the best thing I would recommend is, rather than try and describe the course content, is send you a link to, let me just find it on the website here. I just post a link that people can look for themselves, because I feel like we cover a lot of ground. Like, maybe for some of you, there's a lot of new things that we talked about tonight. Maybe for some of you, you're very familiar with them. But in 2 weeks, we do what I would say is a year's worth of university in 2 weeks, I like to call it. It's pretty intense course content, and this link here will take you to a detailed PDF that goes through day by day exactly what we study. And so I'd say that's the best way for people to get a really good, clear overview of what we'll be talking about while we're in Poland. But it's based on understanding this design approach and the nuts and bolts of it, how we start from scratch and move towards a full design. And we introduce that in the first days. And then we look at very specific topics like pattern understanding. How do we understand the patterns that go on all around us that we've seen all our lives and don't really have a very concrete understanding of? Then we look at subjects like water. We could spend a month talking about water, but we only have a couple of days. And we look at soils, we look at tree systems, and we go into depth with all the things we've been talking about. And we do that in a way that opens up a lot of different doors, but then also ties them all together to leave people confident in, how do I take my piece of land, my 5 hectares, and go through a comprehensive holistic design to move forward with this project. And we have time in the course to do design work on real sites. The site that we'll be running the course on, we're going to be laying out a Keyline Design and holistic management and agroforestry plan for. In fact, some of my interns here in Sweden have already done that for you, and we'll be sharing that when we get there. But they've been using digital. I've been teaching them how to use computer programs to design Keyline designed farms, and they've been working on the site in Poland for fun, just as an exercise. Yeah. But I'd say to look at that link, and it'll give you a very comprehensive overview of the sorts of things we cover in that time.
Okay, thank you very much. Now is the time for answers and questions session. So, are you ready for this?
Sure.
We can
Should
start.
I answer a couple that have just popped up there?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I just say thanks for your comments, folks. That's really kind of you to share those thoughts. I just saw this one. Can you apply permaculture ideas being a vegan or vegetarian? Yes, of course you can. I would say, one thing to be very clear about is farm land has always kept its fertility with animals in the soil and animals on the soil. If you didn't want to keep animals at all, there's ways to do that. But there's ways to keep animals without eating them also, obviously. And being vegan, vegetarian is, it's perfect as it is. But animals are very important on landscapes. There are no vegetarian ecologies. There's no natural landscape on Earth that evolved without animals. So that's really worth considering. There's plenty of animals that also need looking after by loving people, that's for sure. So, that's another option. But yes, you can, but you would need to really carefully do some research on the needs of the land. For example, say I wanted to grow vegetables for a family of 4. I can do most of that in the summer on 10 by 10 meters. But I also then need half an acre of wheat straw just to make the compost to keep that land healthy. So I need a whole field of wheat just to make the carbon material for my compost. And then I usually taking animal manure from someone else to make that compost. So, it could look different ways. You could grow nitrogen-fixing plants to take the place of animal manures, for sure. But in reality, we need to do whatever's practical. You can usually find someone that has horses that you can take some manure from and, use whatever you've got. But yes, you can totally do that. It just looks a bit different. You have to think very carefully about the inputs that you need and how you can do that. But many people are doing things with a vegan vegetarian context, so there's lots of information out there. Cool, thanks Maciek. You liked the PDC he did with me. Do we accept volunteers on our farm? We work with a core team. We have courses that cost money because we basically use that money to do the projects that give people experience. We don't get money in our pockets. I don't have money in my bank account. We do a lot of stuff on the farm, and that money is invested in the farm systems that people come to learn about. So we plan very, very carefully because we want people to get tangible experience setting up systems. So each year we've designed what we're actually going to do. Now we have a core team that's come and learn for the whole season, and they get food and accommodation, and they don't need to spend any money. But we have a lot of people interested in those positions. So in the winter or spring, we put out the positions vacant, and we take in applications, and we select the people that we feel would be a good fit for this place. What I would like to do in the next, within 2 years, I would like to run all the education programs 6 months, because I feel like people need at least 8 weeks to really get their heads around the basic running of the farm. What I would love to offer is 6 months education, very intense education for free, but you must work in exchange for that, like real farm work. But what's hard with running a place like this is it's hard to find people that are skilled enough to be really valuable. Like having 3 really skilled people is much more use than 20 unskilled people, it feels like. I'm really open to it. I want as many people as possible to have this education available. We've been looking at doing online education and different ways to help people that don't have financial resources. But we're living in a very expensive country, and just the basic maintenance costs of a place like this are obscene. It costs a lot of money to run a place like this with a lot of people here. We use wood for cooking, and currently we still use electric for cooking because we have not started work on the renovation of the house because we're too busy on the land. I spend very little time in the house except sleeping. And this is a rare time I'm sitting in my office. Actually, I spend very little time in here. But we're going to install a wood-fired system that heats hot water for the house, does all the cooking, and stores the heat in a useful way. I think wood is the way to go. It's definitely the most reliable, robust system going. If you look at the Ben Fawkes book that was mentioned earlier, he's put a lot of work into his system. That's a kind of system that we have in England in all our old farmhouses, and you can't get more resilient than this. So, yeah, I'm definitely going that way. what would be the first thing you would do with your land farm if you didn't have much money in your pocket? I would I would first do some research on holistic management, and I would write my holistic context. I would spend time working with my partner, my friend, whoever's involved in the project, getting very crystal clear about what you want in your life, the quality of life you want, the resources you have at your disposal, how much money is at your disposal, and write down your statement of purpose, what you're going for, and the forms of production that you'll need to manage to produce them. There's a whole ebook on the Savory Institute website of how to do this. It's kind of what's called in permaculture design your goals and objectives, but it's much clearer and much more precise in holistic management. And one of the reasons I feel like our project is going very smoothly is that we have really put time into clarifying exactly what we're going for, and it means it's very easy to make decisions. So one part in your process might be spending the time working out very clearly what your plan is, what you're going for. If you have no money, it might be the first part of your plan is finding a way to do things with no money or finding some money. Because I can say, like, it costs a lot more money to do up a property than to buy a property. Like, we'll spend already double what we spent buying the farm, doing up the systems here. It costs a lot of money, and so money needs to be involved. Unless you're doing a small holding of, you know, on a really small scale, you can take time instead. But still, there's money involved, I'd say. So the first thing I would do is plan, and then design. Get someone that's good at design to help you, and make a good plan before you start. But this scale of permanence I highlighted in the start of the, let's just bring that up. I would do some research on this scale of permanence here, in the slide here, and design with this framework in mind, right? Because this is the optimal tool for design that I've found, and I've been exploring all the different ecological design frameworks I can find, and we use Keyline Design to organize permaculture, and it's very effective, and I'd recommend you do the same. Yeah. How would you like me to address further questions? Are they popping up in the moderator panel? Or shall I just take questions that pop up here? Okay. Do you know pattern dynamics? No, don't know pattern dynamics. But I'm really into patterns, so sounds good. What's the minimal area needed to create such a farm? That's the sort of question that has no answer. I feel like, what do you want to produce is the first question. Do you want to produce food for yourself and your family? Do you want to produce food for your village? Do you want to produce food that you can sell to earn enough money to just farm full time? You know, what are the details of those questions? Because it might look like running a, you know, micro mushroom growing business out of recycled coffee waste in the middle of the city, on in a disused car garage growing mushrooms. It could be running 1,000 beef cows on hundreds of hectares. It could look any way. What do you really want to do is the first question, and that would lead to how many people need to be involved. I think more people need to be involved on the land. I think what happened here in Sweden when we arrived is this was the most exciting thing that happened in the village for 50 years. And they found it a bit weird to start with, to see 30 people running around planting trees, doing stuff on the land. But at the same time, the old people found it very familiar, because 50 years ago, everyone would have come to cut hay together, just like in Poland, I'm sure. But yeah, we need people on the land to make farms like this work. We need people learning skills again before they're lost in this generation. And yeah, I think it's important. Do we plan to install solar panels or wind power? We're actually looking at a biomass solution. I'm just going to fire up a link if I can find it. One of I'm really interested in regenerative technologies, and this is quite an expensive solution currently, but buying electricity in Sweden is also very expensive. But this is a solution that can take a farm off grid as a biomass wood gasification unit. It can take things like wood chip and carbonize it, produce biochar as a waste product, and run a 20 kilowatt generator that we can power our farm on. So I'm looking at different technologies, the Shompan compost and some kind of wood gasification. I don't think I would go with solar panels or wind myself, other than small ones that powered specific units on the farm, as it were. I'd rather have one big centralized, bigger power source, because we use a fair bit of power for processing chickens or for lighting all the structures here or whatever. I'm not sure. It's something that I would hope to address in a year or two's time. The priority at the moment is animal systems and tree systems, because we want to invest our money at the moment in things that can make us money back, because we could easily spend tens of thousands of euros on fancy eco solutions that will never pay for themselves straight away. So I'd rather farm first and then refine the energy systems over time, is my approach. You fabricated that gas fire? Yes. There you go. Talk to this man. Nice. Yeah, maybe I should come and talk to you when I'm in Poland, because it seems quite expensive. But this was the first turnkey solution where you don't need to know anything about engineering and you can just buy it out of the box and fuel it. So I'm really interested in this technology. Sweden used to lead the way with this technology in the Second World War when they powered all their cars with it. But probably there's a lot of them lying around in the back of barns nowadays that people have forgotten how to use.
Okay, Richard.
Okay.
We had finished our session. It was very useful, and I would like to thank you so much, because it was really good time to learn about permaculture with you, and I hope we will see with you in Kopaniec.
Yeah.
On workshops.
Yeah, I'm sure, like, it's quite a long time commitment for people to come along. But thank you so much, folks, for your kind comments there. It's really, it's wonderful. And
thank you very much. And I hope to see you soon there.
Welcome.
So it was really nice. Okay. Could you turn off your... Okay. Dzięki wszystkim. Już wracamy do języka ojczystego. Oj, coś zniknęło. Jeszcze raz na koniec chciałabym Was zaprosić na warsztaty, które Richard będzie organizował. To będzie południowo-wschodnia Polska, Kopaniec. I na pewno będzie to miło spędzony czas, tak jak teraz przed chwilą. Ja jestem osobiście pod ogromnym wrażeniem wiedzy i takiej zdolności projektowania, racjonalnego projektowania permakulturowych siedlisk samowystarczalnych. To było bardzo użyteczne. Na koniec chciałabym Wam jeszcze powiedzieć, że w Cohabitacie planujemy kursy webinarowe częściej, takie w temacie permakultury, czyli po kursie, który był na temat ogrodnictwa, mamy nadzieję, że rozwiną się kolejne kursy dotyczące właśnie permakultury i samowystarczalności, więc wierzę, że jako tutaj właśnie fani tej tematyki jesteście teraz zadowoleni i będziemy mogli wspólnie się rozwijać, żeby zrealizować te nasze marzenia dotyczące autonomii i samowystarczalności. Na koniec prosiłabym Was, żebyście także złożyli swój feedback, bo to jest dla nas bardzo ważne, żebyśmy też wiedzieli, jak mamy się rozwijać, w jaką stronę mamy się kierować, bo tak naprawdę to Wy jesteście twórcami tej autonomicznej, ale też samoedukacyjnej sieci. Więc dzięki wielkie. Mam nadzieję, że podobało Wam się. Ja jestem pod wrażeniem i do zobaczenia. Pa, pa, pa.
A keystone species is any species in an ecosystem whose population and behavior affects every other species. That's certainly what we are as a species right now. In order for us to design an agriculture or a culture that is ecological, then we have to look to our local models, and that's the forest. That is our teacher.
Creating a multi-storied ecosystem with mushrooms and berries and fruits and nuts and grazing animals and vegetables all interwoven, this idea of permaculture, we can actually be healing forces.
What could it be like if humans can help make this place sing with life? That gets me really fired up because I can just taste the beginning of it.
We can really look at permaculture design as a whole way of seeing the world, looking at problems and seeing how they can turn into solutions.
Coming up with a pattern that brings the landscape to life while meeting human needs. That's what's unique about permaculture.
An ecosystem doesn't require lots of energy input from the outside from another ecosystem. It's finding a way to work with the sun and all the natural cycles to produce what it needs.
Permaculture is a design process that's applicable in any landscape for any set of objectives, and excitingly insightful when we bring it into these urbanized, industrialized landscapes.
Currency is really just energy. It's a flow through the system. We need different kinds of money for different purposes.
An economy that's aligned with permaculture would be an economy in which the best business decision is the same as the best ecological decision.
Agriculture comes from agrarian culture. Agrarian means the soil, culture means the enrichment of it. Agriculture today is the destruction and depletion and extraction of soil. It's closer to mining.
Every culture that's based its staple food crops diet on annual plants has collapsed. Let's now design ecosystems. They're ecologically sound, economically productive, and it's permanent agriculture. We walk away from this place right here, it'll still be producing crops for the next couple thousand years.
Permaculture is a process by which we adapt as human beings to the earth.